What's going on, guys? We have our first reactions to the Matrix Resurrections, Matrix 4, where some of the press and some audiences got to see it last night. And here is the first reactions. Don't worry, no spoilers. I'm just going to go through each reaction and give their thoughts on what they had to say about this movie. I should say first that Matrix 4 is my most anticipated movie that is left for this year. And that included Spider-Man No Way Home, which I got to see yesterday. You can check out my first reaction on the channel, which I loved. But I just had a feeling about Matrix Resurrections that we were going to get something special like the first movie. And I cannot wait to see this movie next week. But let's get into this. This comes from Jermaine Lussier. He said, "I can't stop thinking about the Matrix Resurrections. It brilliantly reinvents the franchise while increasing the importance of the first three films, all while being touching, exciting, and gorgeous. It's very trippy and complex, but I loved it. Can't wait to see it again and again." So that's a pretty good review right there. This comes from Brian Davids. "The Matrix Resurrections is one of the most thought-provoking blockbusters ever made since it grapples with real-world legacy. It has all the elements you want in a Matrix film, but its central love story is where it shines. I also hope Warner Brothers consider a Jessica Henwick-led spin-off." Ooh, that would be pretty awesome. This review right here comes from Robert Daniels. "Keanu Reeves gives one of his best performances in The Matrix Resurrections. Him and Carrie-Anne Moss still have that magic chemistry, carrying a gorgeous, dynamic film that's rough in patches yet still discovers great additions in Yahya Abdul-Mateen II and Jessica Henwick." This comes from Kyle Buchanan. "Matrix Resurrections is a much more meta film than you're expecting, locking on to the original film like a Sonic and Knuckles cartridge so it can remix and riff to Lana Wachowski's delight. Loved all that. Loved the love story. Loved gay actors throwing punches, but action is surprisingly blah, really. If you look at the first three Matrix movies, the action is immense, so that's a surprise right there." This comes from Emily Vanderwerf. "There was a point in the middle of the Matrix Resurrections where I briefly thought it was the best movie ever made, and I haven't convinced myself it's not. I loved it, and a lot of people are gonna hate it. My favorite kind of movie." Me too, Emily. I love those type of ones as well. This comes from Jorel. "Best sequel of the year, The Matrix Resurrections. An absolute blast from its stunning opener, mind-scrambling, deja vu-infested plot to its smile-inducing ending." Well, that's a really good review right there. Big time. This comes from popculture.com. "The Matrix Resurrections is a high-octane nostalgic thrill ride, with a little too much self-awareness and unnecessarily convoluted plot. With any reboot, the question is why. Sadly, the reason for this feels more like a mulligan than a fresh start." Okay, mixed review right there. This comes from Carly Lane Perry. "This film feels like Wachowski grappling with studio pressures to keep the franchise going and its enduring legacy in the most meta way, which makes for a wildly entertaining sequel. Keanu and Carrie-Anne rule as always, but the new cast is a blast." That's awesome right there, because there's a lot of new cast members for this movie, so that's good to hear that they knock it out of the park. That's an interesting comment there, though. Wachowski grappling with studio pressures to keep the franchise going and its enduring legacy, but in a meta way. A lot of meta references here about this movie. This review comes from Gabe. "The Matrix Resurrections is definitely the best Matrix sequel, though it has its problems with the film's self-aware nature, the uniqueness of the story, and the practicality of the action sequences are back." That's good to hear. "Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss steal the show, and the third act is sad, or epic, I don't know. But yeah, a lot of the comments as well about self-awareness. Very interesting. This comes from Aaron. "I found so much to enjoy in The Matrix Resurrections. It's a big, ambitious, weird Wachowski movie that does so much more than deliver the same old thing. Lucky to have this level of creativity at this budget level. Still, many will hate it, just like the sequels. Yes, and I think a lot of people will hate this movie as well, but come on, it's The Matrix. Some people love them, some people hate them. But that was an interesting comment right there about this movie not being the same as the previous three, not being the same old thing. So I like that. This review comes from Harmony is Canon. The Matrix Resurrections has indeed topped Zack Snyder's Justice League for me as the movie of the year 2021. What? I so want to talk about it. I can't wait to see my mutuals lose their minds about it as well. I can't even imagine what is there not to like. I have zero complaints. Wow, no complaints whatsoever. It's awesome. I'm better than Zack Snyder's Justice League. I would say Zack Snyder's Justice League is my number one this year, but I definitely think that The Matrix Resurrections has the potential to knock that off the top. We'll have to wait and see, but no complaints there at all from Harmony. This review comes from Dan Casey. The Matrix Resurrections is equal parts metatextual middle finger to reboot culture, an epic sci-fi love story with more of the nightmarish go pods that today's teens crave. Even when it didn't work for me, Lana Wachowski and co were swinging for the fences, which rules. That's awesome right there. That's a great description. And I like this because Matrix Resurrections is supposed to be a sequel, it's supposed to be a reboot, and it's supposed to be neither. Very, very meta, very weird, and I would expect nothing less from Lana Wachowski, so that's awesome. This review comes from Liz Shannon Miller. It's not perfect. There are some moments that might be complete and utter nonsense, but while The Matrix Revolutions broke my heart, The Matrix Resurrections did the other thing, and I'm just so happy about that. So, there's somebody right there who didn't like Matrix Revolutions, which was a sequel to the original Matrix, but they liked Matrix Resurrections because maybe it didn't, twist their heart as much in terms of changing up stuff that people loved about the original Matrix so much. This review right here comes from David Chen. The Matrix Resurrections was a disappointment. Some cool visuals and a handful of interesting ideas that expand on the Matrix universe, but the movie's lack of stakes is deadly and even worse. Its plot detracts from what was accomplished in the OG trilogy. A huge missed opportunity. So David Chen does not like The Matrix Resurrections whatsoever. And I expect this film to be more of a love story. That's how they're describing it. So I think it's definitely about the relationship between Neo and Trinity, and maybe less about the entire world, the simulation, the Matrix, and then the real world. So maybe it's just more of a love story than we were expecting. This review right here was from Sean Mulville. I was skeptical at first, but Lana Wachowski really did it with The Matrix Resurrections. It's an action-packed meta-sequel reboot that really ponders what The Matrix means in 2021. Hands down, the best Matrix since the original. Wow. Since the original, that would be awesome to see. I've been predicting for a while that The Matrix Resurrections will be on the same level as the original one. I don't know if it's going to have the same influential impact as the first did. Probably not, but I definitely think it will be up there with the first movie. We'll have to wait and see. This review right here comes from Nigel Smith. The Matrix Resurrections is more fun than I remember the sequels ever being. Yes, it's bogged down in exposition like the previous two, but there's a knowing wink to it all now. Newcomers, Neil Patrick Harris and Jonathan Groff, are key to that. Oh, and the climax rocks. Brilliant. Some good information right there about Patrick Harris, Neil Patrick Harris and Jonathan Groff, that they're fantastic in this movie, which is great. My theory is that Neil Patrick Harris is playing a rebooted version of The Architect, and Jonathan Groff is playing a rebooted version of Agent Smith, which I think maybe has already been confirmed in some interviews and stuff like that. But yeah, that's been my prediction for a while. So that's awesome. And the climax rocks. Ooh, I wonder what that's about. This comes from Saki Hassan. The Matrix Resurrections, a legacy sequel that met all my expectations and then some. It honours the extant trilogy's resolution and finds a way to meaningfully move past it while preserving so much of what I love about this world. Awesome review right there from Zaki. The next review comes from Chase, the Hutchinson. So The Matrix Resurrections is brilliant. It plays with time, putting the old in conversation with the new through visual poetry that's given life by Lana Wachowski's reflective yet playful direction. It is one final great film to end the year, and I can't wait to write more about it. Now, this could be my favourite review right here. Absolutely brilliant. It plays with time, putting the old in conversation with the new through visual poetry that's given life by Lana Wachowski's reflective yet playful direction. Now, that's an awesome description of The Matrix Resurrections right there. Plays with time. What's that about? We've seen in the trailers and TV spots that the Matrix movie, the original, is in this world in some way, so I'm excited to see how that works out. This comes from Scott Mendelson, who kind of hates Zack Snyder and the Snyder Cut, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and yeah, he's kind of a funny reviewer. I bet he loved this one. The Matrix Resurrections is a comedy. The action is disappointing and the new characters are thin, but the meta-textual commentary is biting. It wrestles with its own legacy in that Jurassic World Bad Boys 3 RP1 fashion. I prefer the first 3, but this is a wild swing. So he's saying, I could see what they were doing. They took some risks, fair play to them, but it just wasn't for me. This comes from the Nerd Apocalypse. Quick non-spoilers thoughts on The Matrix Resurrections. I think it's the second best movie in the franchise, not as heavy on philosophy as the original, but action beats were a good time. Some things needed more explanation, but all in all, I had a good time. Definitely worth it. So that's awesome. He recommends this movie. And it's not as philosophical as the first one, which is a surprise to me because I thought it would match the original in that aspect. This comes from Dolores. The Matrix Resurrections squarely faces its own legacy. It once again questions the nature of reality. It's a pugnacious remix of the story that is ready to fist fight with the audience's expectations. At the same time, the film allows itself to be vulnerable and lighthearted. So that's a bit of emotion there, lighthearted, interesting enough stuff. This review comes from Courtney Howard. The Matrix Resurrections action sequences are big, meaningful, engaging, with character parallels and connections. Lana Wachowski and co tread subtle, nuanced nods to other films through the fight choreography, visual effects, production design, and cinematography. So it's very much a tribute to the old movies, but also doing its own thing. This comes from Perry Nemiroff. The Matrix Resurrections is a solid addition to the franchise. Had a feeling the concept would lend itself to another installment, and sure enough, they found loads of clever ways to continue the story while also evolving the whole concept of the Matrix. So she's saying right here, this isn't an ending to the Matrix story, it's a new beginning. There is potential for sequels, maybe even spin-offs. So that's something I'm excited. So I hope The Matrix Resurrections can do well at the box office to warrant a sequel or do well enough on HBO Max. This comes from JoeBlow.com. The Matrix Resurrections feels like exactly that. A resurrection of the first film. A lively and thrilling sequel. Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss haven't lost an ounce of their shockingly good chemistry. And you can tell that just from the trailers and TV spots. The chemistry between these two actors is fantastic, as it was in the original trilogy, and now again in Resurrections. This comes from Stephen Weintraub of Collider. Went into the screen of The Matrix Resurrections with a dozen theories and none of them were right. First act of the film warped my mind with its brilliance. Loved so many things in the movie. Need to see it again for final judgment. So we all have theories and we might be wrong, we might be right. Probably wrong because it's hard to predict The Matrix. This comes from Randy Jones. The Matrix Resurrections is the 22 Jump Street of Matrix sequels. It's a high-octane thrill ride that is cheekily meta, hella violent in its core, has a beautifully romantic plot. Lana Wachowski might have just made her best sci-fi romance flick yet. What? Better than the original? Really? That's very, very interesting. And hella violent. Wasn't expecting that. This comes from James Preston Poole. The Matrix Resurrections is two things. A giant middle finger to the state of IP-driven blockbusters and the proper Matrix 4 we deserve. Dense, visually one of a kind, heartfelt, going all in on the boldness of the sequels. No one does it like Lana Wachowski. Definitely. She's one of the greatest directors of all time just by bringing us the original Matrix. And I'm so excited to see what she can do in Resurrections. This comes from Griffin. The Matrix Resurrections is an absolute slam dunk, a bold, deeply personal, vibrant, and biting anti-legacy sequel that challenges the complexity of our nostalgic, obsessed world and how the system has evolved to exploit that. This is how you resurrect a franchise. Brilliant review there, Griffin. Yeah, so looks like that it makes fun, not make fun, but it shows kind of these IPs that just do sequels and reboots for money and shows them up for what they are, but then this is kind of that as well, which is meta about it, which is very interesting, and this is the best way to resurrect a franchise. This comes from Ethan Halter. Absolutely adored The Matrix Resurrections, which builds on where the sequels left off in beautiful and unexpected ways, and presents a world that's entirely consistent with what came before, and also opens it up to a host of new stories. My synapses have been firing for days. Awesome. That's what I want. I want a feeling after Matrix Resurrections. I want to come out and I want to not have known what I just watched. I want to be thinking about it for days. I want to be eating my Christmas dinner, my turkey, my ham, and sitting there like, what was that movie? I have to go back and see it. You know, that's the kind of feeling I want after watching The Matrix. This comes from Chris. The Matrix Resurrections is a total blast. Weird, romantic, extremely meta, and consistently funny. I kind of loved it. Also, everyone in this movie is ridiculously hot. Yeah, I suppose you could say that as well, Chris. But yeah, that's awesome. Weird, romantic, meta. We see a theme of descriptions of this movie. This comes from Eric Davis, who had this to say. He works for Fandango and Rotten Tomatoes. The first act of The Matrix Resurrections is stellar, smart, funny, weird, self-referential, and unexpected. Add to it widely inventive action sequences, lofty storytelling decisions, and a ton of big ideas that will fuel lots of questions. Trust me, multiple viewings will be required. That's what I want. I want to break down, dissect this movie for days, for years, with you guys as well, online, because that's the kind of movie I'm into and want to experience. But that's a great description right there as well. And this comes from Jeff Zine. The Matrix Resurrections rocks. Ambitious, sci-fi, metafiction, sure to be divisive. It's Lana Wachowski's meditation on why she didn't want to do another Matrix movie via another Matrix movie. Creator versus destroyer, revival, and the illusion of choice in a brand new context. Awesome review right there. So basically Lana Wachowski is showing us why she didn't want to do another sequel by showing us how to do another sequel. Guys, it's just crazy meta-ness. It's absolutely insane. This comes from Heather Vixen. Or Wixon. Without a doubt, the Matrix movie is my fave movie of 2021. It's easily the best film since the original. Keanu and Carrie-Anne are absolutely stellar. The action kicks all kinds of ass, and the story blew my mind. It exceeded every single expectation I had. The Matrix Resurrections. It blew her mind. Will it blow our mind? I really hope so, and it exceeded her expectations. This comes from it's from Courtney Howard again. She gave another review. Okay, let's just read it. The Matrix Resurrections is a terrific, awe-inducing meta mind bender, completely in line with the franchise's legacy, finds an innovative, high-concept way to frame the new story. Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss chemistry burns. Jessica Henwick is a revelation. Awesome. And the last review is from David. The Matrix Resurrections, despite and because of its infinite goofiness, is the boldest and most vividly personal Hollywood sequel since The Last Jedi? What? A silly, sincere galaxy brain take on reboot culture that makes peace with how modern blockbusters are now only about themselves. Another great description. So, she didn't want to make a sequel, but she's showing us why she didn't want to make a sequel by making a sequel that's not a sequel. It's a reboot, but it's not a reboot. It's just another movie. It's The Matrix. I can't explain it, guys. I don't know what's going on. Matrix Resurrections, December 22nd. I can't wait to see this movie. I'm so excited. So those were a lot of the first reactions to watching The Matrix Resurrections that broke last night. It's not every single one of them, but it's a good majority that I took from the internet, and most of them are pretty good, positive reviews. I would say 95-98% of them were pretty positive and very good. So, look, I hope this movie does well at the box office because I love the Matrix world. the meta-ness of it all. Keanu Reeves, Carrie-Anne Moss, Lana Wachowski. I just love these characters, these actors, these directors, these writers, because they're so different from the other stuff that we get, which is superheroes every other week. So I want to see more of this world. I want to see TV series. I want to see games. I want to see movies. I want to see the Matrix universe blow up to be something even more. If Lana Wachowski wants to come back or not, maybe her sister will come back next time. But I want this to do well. I really, really hope it does well. I don't know if Spider-Man will affect it. Spider-Man No Way Home, which is going to be a massive hit. It's definitely make $1 billion at the box office. Crazy, crazy stuff. But I need this film to do well. I want to see more of this world because it's so interesting to me. It's so thought-provoking. And a lot of these descriptions, these reviews, are interesting in their own right to dissect each person's individual experience with it and some great kind of ways of describing it. So I want to have that experience as well. I want to describe it, but I also want to see more of this world if the story, pulls that in that direction. But will it? Maybe some people interpret it as a sequel, a reboot. Maybe more will happen, maybe spin-offs. I don't know. But The Matrix Resurrection is coming out very soon. I hope it does well at the box office. I hope it does well on streaming because it's a day-and-date movie, which Warner Brothers kind of screwed it by doing that. But we'll have to see how it goes. But guys, what's your thoughts on these first reactions to The Matrix Resurrections? Does it make you more excited? Are you nervous? Are you going to see this movie? Have you seen the previous three? If not, go watch them, then watch this movie because we need to make this movie a success because I want to see more. Guys, thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Enjoy and get ready to enter the Matrix.